Holiday hunger has been a huge topical issue due to the pandemic. Food banks have been a stigma for young people. And how do you plan on tackling holiday hunger, and how would you reduce that stigma in the future?
Well, ideally, it'd be, we would like to not have people so reliant on food banks, I think is the really key issue, and looking at how we can work on that. That isn't the immediate early fix. So I think you raise a really good point about stigma and about what's going on. And I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that that's a very hard win, and that's a very big ask, because that there will always be an element of stigma attached to that. I think what we need to do is to help young people to understand that actually, no matter what the situation that's happened, that enables, that meant their family is in that situation, that it's to empower them to understand that this is not something that they've created or they're responsible for, and actually being able to access those schemes and access other support that comes with food bank use, such as free school meals or holiday club meals. Using those sorts of things shouldn't be being seen as being personal to them. And I think that comes a lot from education and empowerment and understanding. And that's something I'm very keen to see, is that we have a greater discussions within schools, within education settings, within organisations, that actually says, this is just unfortunately where we are at the moment. And it's around sort of saying, and that's why Marcus Rashford is such an amazing advocate for around this area. And he would be someone very much I would be wanting to invite in and work with, because he is the epitome of being in that situation as a young person and as a child doesn't mean that you can't go on to achieve, your dreams and your ideals and where you want to be, and to fail to succeed. And food poverty is something where you would ordinarily think, if I'm in that situation and I'm really struggling, I'm not going to be a top level athlete. I'm not going to be playing for those clubs, because that's not something that's open for me. And I think that's why he's such a good advocate, because he's at the pinnacle, of where he's achieved. And I think using something like that and his openness and his honesty, and being able to translate that into an education for young people to actually take away a lot of the stigma. And you know what I've really noticed in the meeting today? It's something that I do because it impacts on friends and colleagues. It's not to do with food poverty. But if you sit in a meeting with a whole load of people my age, they wouldn't have their pronouns. It's really acceptable for the youth. And I think that that's where we fight the stigma, is it's not about convincing my generation. It's not about convincing the boomers. It's not about doing those sorts of things. It's about speaking to young people and saying, this is not a problem that has been created by those who are accessing it. Let's just make this normal. If someone has brought in something that's, that makes it stand out, that they are getting free school meals or have gone to a food bank, so what? And that's where we need to get to with young people, and the ability and the willingness to change and to embrace that sort of change in the same way that we have with using pronouns is exactly what gives me the hope that actually that is where the change will bring. And that comes from education, and that comes from empowering support for each other in the same way.
Oh, I have to say, I mean, I was a child of a single parent, and I had food vouchers in the 80s. So I have full respect for anyone that has food poverty or has to have their meals paid for them. Do you know what? It's not shameful. It's not wrong. It's something that government and councils can do that is right, is feeding children that don't necessarily come from wealthier backgrounds. I think the response nationally has been ridiculous. The fact that it took a footballer to stand up and say, why aren't you feeding these kids, is ridiculous. And as politicians, we should all be ashamed. I know we've said as a party that you should be feeding kids. I mean, it shouldn't stop at holiday times. And I think what's made it more acute is the fact that you've got families that would normally send their child to school to get those meals. Yeah, they're having to feed them at home themselves. So when it comes to the school holidays, it's just that budget's not been there, and it's that understanding, or that, I wouldn't say understanding, that budgeting of food and that managing of food through the week to get to the weekend or get to holidays has just been more difficult because of the pandemic. So actually sending out food parcels during holidays should have been a given. I think moving forward, as we move out of the pandemic and people start to go to schools, how do we deal with holiday food poverty? We should have access to a holiday food fund. And that's something that can be set up across Greater Manchester in collaboration with the councils and the Greater Manchester's Combined Authority. I don't want to promise it or commit to it, because you're going to have to look at all the figures and how logistically it works. But I know it's something we could do. And I think Greater Manchester should lead and say, look, we've done this for our citizens. The rest of the country can do the same, whether you're in the West Midlands with your Metro Mayor, Liverpool City region, or the West of England. You can do this. We all have the powers to do this. Greater London, you also, we can be a leader on this and show the rest of the country how to move forward. But it is something that needs tackling.
So I've started to do it, Mira, but it's early days and I'm not yet where I want to be with it. But I've launched a scheme called No Child Goes Hungry. And what we are doing through that is raising funds at the GM level to provide support that's additional to what our councils can provide, because our councils are doing things at our holiday food clubs. But this scheme is meant to just add to what the councils are doing. So to give you an example, we've signed a deal with the co-op where we have cards that pay for a meal deal. So, for a young person who doesn't want to go to a club somewhere, it's a better option for them. So over the Christmas holiday period, I think we gave out 1,000 cards per district. So I think it was 10,000 overall. And that's a partnership that the Greater Manchester Mayor's charity is running with the co-op. And some of the funding was given to community groups as well. I've said to Marcus Rashford that I want him to be more proud of Greater Manchester than anywhere else in the country, because he needs to be able to point to his home area doing everything that he's calling for. And I'm really, really determined to demonstrate that. So No Child Goes Hungry will be in my manifesto. I want to expand it pretty significantly. And we want it to be a permanent, in the way that A Bed Every Night is our permanent homelessness scheme. No Child Goes Hungry will be our permanent holiday hunger scheme. And where I want it to go to, just to finish off, is, imagine this, if you had cafes and shops and restaurants that had that sticker in their window, No Child Goes Hungry, what it would say, in any child could walk in and get a subsidized or free meal. And so I want to build out a network of food outlets who will join us and take the stigma away of someone having a card, or you know what I mean, having to go to a club of some kind. That's the dream, but we're not there yet. But that's where I want to get it to.